Chapter 9. A Few Questions. The next day, Arbogast visited all the hotels near Fairvale. He showed everyone a picture of Marion. "Have you seen this girl?" he asked them. The answer was always no. At last, as he was driving along the old highway outside Fairvale, he saw a small motel by the side of the road. "Maybe I'll be lucky with this one," he thought. "I've tried all the others." Arbogast left the road and drove up to the motel. Norman Bates was sitting outside his office in the evening sun, reading a magazine. He stood up and smiled as Arbogast got out of his car. "I almost missed you," Arbogast said. "I forgot to turn on the sign," Norman replied. "Do you want a room?" "No, thanks. I only want to ask a few questions." "What sort of questions?" asked Norman, turning to go into his office. "I'm trying to find a girl," said Arbogast, following him. "My name's Arbogast. I'm a detective." "Oh, really?" Norman tried to smile calmly. "A girl?" "Her name's Marion Crane," Arbogast explained. "She's from Phoenix. She disappeared last Friday, and her family are very worried." He showed Norman the photograph. "Have you seen her?" Norman shook his head without looking. "Maybe she stopped here about a week ago." "No, I haven't had any visitors for more than 2 weeks. Business has been bad since they moved the highway." "Can I see your book?" Norman gave him the book from under the desk without speaking. He watched as Arbogast took out an envelope and studied the names in the book. "Ah." Arbogast's finger stopped at the name of Marie Samuels from Los Angeles. "You see? She was here last Saturday night. Look, the writing is the same as on this envelope." "So," Norman said in a weak voice, "the writing on this envelope belongs to Miss Crane." Norman opened his mouth to speak, but his mouth was dry and he couldn't think of the right words. Finally, he said, "It's difficult sometimes." Arbogast looked at Norman. "What's difficult?" "Remembering things." I know," Arbogast said softly, trying not to frighten him. "You know, I wasn't lying, mister. I just forgot about last week." "I understand." Arbogast's friendliness seemed to make Norman calmer. He smiled and asked to see the photograph again. This time he studied it carefully. "Oh, yes," he said. "I remember now. It was raining. This girl arrived late at night. She was tired and went straight to bed. She left early the next morning." "Did she meet anybody here?" "No, she was alone." "Did she phone anybody?" "No." "How do you know?" Norman shut his eyes. It was happening again. His face was burning and he couldn't think of an answer. Finally he said, "She was tired. She said she wanted to go straight to bed because she had a long journey the next morning. And now, Mr. Arbogast, I'm very busy. I have to go." "One more question, please," Arbogast said as Norman began to walk away. "Is she still here?" "No, she isn't. I told you before. If you don't believe me, I'll show you all the rooms." "No, that's all right." Arbogast smiled. He followed Norman outside. It was dark now. He looked up at the house on the hill and noticed a light in a window. "Is anyone at home?" he asked as Norman was walking away. Norman turned round and smiled. "No." "But there's someone sitting by that window." Arbogast pointed at the house. "Oh, that's my mother. She's ill." Arbogast looked hard at Norman for a moment, then said, "Did that girl offer you a lot of money?" "What do you mean?" "To hide her here, maybe?" Look, mister, if you think I kidnapped her or something. I'm not saying that. But perhaps she offered you money and asked you not to tell anyone. Maybe she told you some stupid story. Mr. Arbogast, I'm not stupid, Norman said. No, of course you're not. But sometimes it's just too easy to believe a pretty girl. Even if I'm stupid, my mother isn't. Norman was getting excited again. My mother didn't believe anything she said. So your mother met her? Arbogast looked surprised. Can I meet your mother too? I'd like to talk to her. No, you can't, I told you. She's sick. Arbogast wanted to talk to the mother, but there was something strong and icy about Norman now. He decided not to push him. I'll come back later, he thought, after I've phoned the girl's sister and told her what I know. Chapter 10. Shadow. Behind the curtain, after phoning Lila with the news of his conversation with Norman Bates, Arbogast drove back to the motel. There was a light in the office and the sign was now on, but he couldn't find Norman anywhere. Looking up at the old house, he could still see the old woman by the window. He could see her shadow behind the curtain. I'll have to go and speak to her without her son's help, he thought. After climbing the hill, Arbogast found that the front door was open. He walked inside, took his hat off, and waited for a few seconds. Everything was quiet. He looked at the mirror, the flowers on the wallpaper, the old pictures on the wall. Feeling sure that the son was busy somewhere, he decided to go upstairs and talk to the mother alone. He walked up the stairs very slowly. He didn't want to make a noise, and if he was honest, he felt a little afraid. With its old furniture and silent rooms, this house was very strange. At the top of the stairs, Arbogast heard the sound of the bedroom door. He turned round and saw the old woman. She was running straight towards him with her long dress, white face, and cold, mad eyes. He was too surprised to move. He saw the large silver knife above her head, and he tried to lift his hands, but he was too late. The knife cut his face open from the top of his head, through his left eye, to the corner of his mouth. He fell back down the stairs and lay very still. He couldn't move his arms or legs, but he could lift his head. With his one good eye, he looked up the stairs. The old woman was flying down towards him, the silver knife in her hand, screaming like an animal. The last thing that he ever saw was the terrible white face above him as she brought the knife down straight into his heart. Chapter 11. A visit to the sheriff. Sam and Lila sat in the room behind the shop, waiting for Arbogast to return. It's over an hour, said Lila. Why isn't he back yet? Maybe he found something important. Lila pushed back her chair and stood up. He's more than an hour late. He hasn't even called. I'm going to the old highway. I know he's found something. Are you coming with me? Sam stood up with a sigh. I'll go. You stay here, he said. Somebody must be here if Arbogast comes back. The motel was dark and empty when Sam arrived. He called Arbogast's name several times, but nobody answered. He looked up at the big house behind the motel and saw somebody at the window. I guess that's the mother, he thought. The old woman that Arbogast wanted to speak to. He climbed the hill and tried the door. Again, no answer. Sam drove back to Fairvale. There's nobody at the motel, he told Lila. No Arbogast, no Bates, just a sick old woman who couldn't answer the door. I'm worried, Lila said. Something's wrong. I agree, said Sam. We have to tell the police. Let's visit Judd Chambers. He's the sheriff of this town. He'll be able to help us. The sheriff and his wife had to get out of bed to answer the door. It was late, but they asked Sam and Lila to come in. They listened while Sam told them about Marion and Arbogast. Arbogast phoned us to say that he wanted to go back to the motel. He wanted to speak to Mrs. Bates, said Sam. But that was 3 hours ago. I didn't know that Norman had a wife, said Mrs. Chambers, surprised. No, Sam explained. It's an old woman, his mother. The sheriff thought for a minute, then asked Lila, "When did your sister disappear?" "She left Phoenix a week ago." "How did you know that she came here?" "She came to see me," Sam explained. "And she didn't say anything to you?" The sheriff was still looking at Lila. "No, she just ran away." "From what?" Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Lila said quietly, "She stole some money." "A lot?" $40,000. "Why didn't you tell the police before?" "We wanted Marion to give back the money without telling the police." "Did this detective talk about the money when he phoned you 3 hours ago?" "The money doesn't matter, does it?" Lila cried unhappily. "I just want to find my sister." The sheriff sighed and tried to look friendly. "What can I do?" "I'm sure there's something wrong," said Lila. "At the motel, I mean." Mrs. Chambers looked at Lila and she felt sorry for her. "Why don't you telephone Norman at the motel?" she said to her husband. "It's late." "Oh, please call," said Lila. The sheriff sighed again and picked up the telephone. "Hello?" he said a few seconds later. "Norman? It's Sheriff Chambers speaking. Listen, I have some people here. They're worried. Did you have any visitors tonight?" "No, not a customer. A detective." Judd Chambers listened quietly for a minute, then put down the phone. "Yes," he said, turning to Sam and Lila. "The detective was there tonight. Norman told him about the girl. The detective said thank you and left." "Without seeing Mr. Bates's mother?" Lila asked. The sheriff looked Lila straight in the eye. "Norman's mother died 10 years ago," he said. "She killed her lover, then she killed herself. It was in all the newspapers. Norman found them dead together in bed." "But that isn't true. I saw her," Sam cried. "Yes," Lila agreed. "Arbogast saw her too." Judd Chambers replied, looking at his wife. "Very strange. If Norman's mother is still alive, who was the woman who killed herself 10 years ago?" Norman Bates put down the phone after speaking to Sheriff Chambers. "The police will be here soon," he thought. "I must hide Mother before they come." He ran out of the office, up the hill to the old house, and climbed the stairs to his mother's room. "Mother, I have something to say," he said. The old woman laughed. "You're a stupid boy telling me what to do. Mother, it's important." "No, I will not hide in the fruit cellar. I'm staying here. This is my room and no one will ever take me away." "They'll come for you, Mother," Norman tried to explain. "That man came after the girl. Now someone will come after him. Mother, please, just for a few days, so that they won't find you." "A few days in that ugly old cellar?" "No, you hid me there once before. I'll never go there again. Now go away." But Norman wasn't listening. He picked his mother off the bed and carried her out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and into the fruit cellar. Chapter 12. Room 1. The next day, Sunday morning, Sam and Lila met Judd Chambers and his wife as they were coming out of church. "Do you want to go to the motel with us?" Lila asked. "I went before breakfast," said the sheriff. "What did Mr. Bates say about my sister?" "The same as he told your detective," I promise you, Miss Crane, Norman Bates is alone at the motel. I looked everywhere. You didn't even see his mother? No, I didn't. I'm sorry. If you want the police to help you, you'll have to make a report in the usual way. You can see me this afternoon if you like. I'll be happy to help you. Well, said Sam, after saying goodbye to the sheriff and his wife, maybe I was dreaming and Arbogast was lying. Perhaps I saw a shadow on the curtain, that's all. You weren't dreaming and Arbogast wasn't lying, Lila told him. There's something wrong, and I'm going to the Bates Motel immediately. Come on. Sam and Lila drove quickly to the motel on the old highway. While Sam looked for Norman Bates in the office, Lila stayed outside. She was interested in the house on the hill. There was something dark and strange about it, even in the morning sunshine. Suddenly, she saw a tall, thin man at the top of the hill. He stood still at first, then he began to walk quickly down the hill towards her. Lila called to Sam, who ran out of the office. Norman Bates wasn't surprised to see the young man and woman outside his office. He walked down the hill towards them with his hands in his pockets. "Do you want a room?" he asked them pleasantly. "Yes, please," said Sam. "Then follow me." Norman smiled, walking past them into his office. "Is room 10 okay?" he asked, taking the key from the small cupboard on the wall behind the desk. "I'd like to write my name in the book first," said Sam. "Okay." Norman took the book from under the desk and gave it to Sam. While Sam was writing his name, Norman watched Lila. She was looking at the list of names in the book. "I know who you are," Norman thought. "You're looking for the man who came yesterday. Well, you can look. You won't find anything. I've hidden everything, and you'll never find my mother in the cellar. But I mustn't make any mistakes. I must be careful." He took the book and pen from Sam. "Thank you." He smiled. "Now I'll get your bags." "We haven't got any." "Okay, I'll show you to your room." "Don't worry," said Sam, taking the key. "We'll find it." When Sam and Lila were alone in their room, Lila sat on the bed and began to cry. "I know something terrible has happened to Marion," she said. "Seeing that old house on the hill, the way that man kept looking at us, I can feel it." "I agree," said Sam. "But we need to find something to show the police. Let's go and search room 1. That's the room that Arbogast said she stayed in, isn't it?" Sam and Lila opened the door and looked outside. They couldn't see anyone. Hoping that nobody was watching them, they hurried nervously back, past the other rooms to room 1. They searched everywhere for some information about Marion. Something to show that Bates knew where the money was, perhaps. They found nothing in the bedroom, so they went into the bathroom. "That's interesting," Sam said. "No shower curtain." Suddenly, Lila noticed something. "Look," she said, picking a small piece of paper out of the toilet. It was wet, but she could still read something on it. "It's a number, 40,000. She looked at Sam. "This shows us that Marion was here." "We know that already," said Sam. "You don't understand. It shows us that Bates knew about the money." "Okay, I'll talk to him," Sam said and walked towards the door. But Lila stopped him. "No," she said. "Let's talk to that old woman in the house. She told Arbogast something, and I want her to tell me the same thing. You find Bates and talk to him. I'm going to talk to his mother." Sam wasn't happy about Lila's plan, but he agreed. Opening the door, he looked out. "It's clear," he said to Lila. "No one's watching, you can go." Sam quietly shut the door as Lila ran towards the hill. He found Bates in his office. "Are you looking for me?" Bates asked. "Yes," said Sam, standing in front of Bates so that he couldn't see Lila. "I'm bored. My wife's asleep and I wanted to talk to someone." "Good," Norman smiled. "Come in and shut the door." Chapter 13. The House on the Hill. Lila climbed the hill to the old house and pushed the front door. It opened slowly. She walked inside and shut the door behind her. It was sunny outside, but inside the house it was strangely cold and dark. There was an unpleasant smell of dry wood and old furniture. I mustn't be afraid, Lila thought. I must find the old woman. She can tell me about Marion. Maybe I'll even find my sister here. So, thinking about her sister, Lila bravely began to move towards the stairs. "You don't talk very much, do you?" Sam said to Bates in the motel office. Bates, with his hands in his pockets and his back against the wall, laughed nervously. "I thought that people who lived alone enjoyed talking. You're alone, aren't you?" "Yes." "I hate being alone," said Sam. "When I'm alone, I go mad." Norman stopped smiling. "Why do you say that?" "I think that people who live alone go mad," Sam answered, feeling quietly pleased. The smooth young man with the boyish smile was beginning to look uncomfortable. "Don't you agree?" Norman's face went red. Lila arrived at the top of the stairs and knocked on the bedroom door. "Mrs. Bates?" she called softly. There was no reply, so she pushed the door open and walked inside. She couldn't believe her eyes. Everything was so old, from the heavy curtains by the window to the golden lamps on the darkly colored walls. She walked across the room nervously towards the large cupboard with a mirror on the door. Opening the door, she saw a line of long, flowery dresses. The kind of dresses that women wore 50 years ago. Lila closed the cupboard and looked round the room. Her eyes rested on a small table near the bed. She looked at the small glass cats, the silver soap dishes, the old photographs of children. Or were they different photographs of the same child? Everything was very old, but there was something even more unusual than this. Everything was so tidy. This was very strange. If this is the mother's bedroom, Lila thought, why doesn't she touch anything? The only thing that she seems to use is the bed. I can see from the bedclothes that she was here a short time ago, so she's here somewhere. But where? "I don't think you're happy here," Sam told Bates. "Why don't you sell this place and leave?" "This place is my world," Bates said. "I grew up in that house. I was a happy child. My mother and I were very happy." Lila looked inside another room. It was a small room with an untidy bed and lots of books and children's things on the floor. Norman's room, she thought, picking up some of the books. They were about the mysteries of life and strange illnesses. Looking at the unusual books and the children's playthings on the floor, Lila thought that she was beginning to understand something about Norman. He's a little boy who loves his mother, she thought. An intelligent boy who has never grown up. "You look nervous," Sam told Bates. "Have I frightened you?" "What are you talking about?" "I've said something about your mother and you look afraid. How are you going to do it?" "Do what?" "Buy a new motel. You won't have to hide your mother if you go to another town." Norman's eyes became cold and narrow. He hated this man and wanted him to go. "Where will you get the money?" Sam continued. "Or do you already have the money? $40,000 perhaps?" Bates walked into the room behind the office, and Sam followed him. "Your mother knows about the money, doesn't she?" Sam said. "She knows what you did to get it, and I think she'll tell us." Bates turned round, his eyes burning, his heart racing. "I know why you're here," he shouted. "Where's that girl who came here with you?" Sam said nothing. He turned away and began to walk out of the door. This was a mistake. Bates ran up behind him and hit him hard on the head with a metal box. Sam fell to the floor and Bates ran out of the office as quickly as he could. "I must find that girl before she finds Mother," he thought, as he ran up the hill towards the old house. Chapter 14. The Cellar. When Lila came back down to the bottom of the stairs, she looked through the window by the front door and saw Bates. He was running up the hill towards the house. She had no time to ask herself about Sam. She had to hide. As Lila ran towards the kitchen, she heard Bates at the front door. Suddenly, she noticed some stairs. They seemed to go down towards some kind of cellar. Without thinking, she ran onto the top stair and waited. Bates stood still for a second. He couldn't see Lila, but he knew she was in the house, probably upstairs, looking for his mother. Lila stood up when she heard Bates upstairs in his mother's room. Now she could escape and find Sam. But she couldn't stop looking at the cellar door below her. Maybe the mother was down there? Perhaps Marion and Arbogast were prisoners down there? She had to go down to learn the secrets that were hiding behind that door. It was dark inside the cellar, and there was a strange smell of dead animals and oil. She stood still for a few seconds. Then she thought she could see a light on the opposite side of the room. It was coming from underneath a door. She walked slowly towards it in the dark, past tables full of glass bottles, knives, and tins. At last, she came to the door and opened it slowly. It was a small room with one light in the ceiling. In the middle of the room, there was a wooden chair facing the opposite wall, and on the chair there was a woman. Lila looked at the back of her head. She seemed to be asleep. "Mrs. Bates?" Lila said quietly. She didn't want to frighten her. "Mrs. Bates?" she said again, moving slowly towards her. The woman didn't answer. Lila touched her shoulder. Lila turned the woman's chair round and looked down at her face. The first thing that she saw was the woman's teeth. They were large and yellow. And then Lila realized that the old woman had no eyes. She was looking down at the dry brown face of a dead woman. Lila screamed. She turned to run away, but stopped. There was a tall, shadowy shape by the door. The shadow had long gray hair and wore a flowery dress. As it moved into the light, Lila could see the face. A white face with a terrible smile and mad, shining eyes. Then she saw the knife. She wanted to scream again, but her mouth was dry and she felt too weak. She moved back as the mad old woman ran towards her, laughing wildly, the silver knife in her hand, ready. Then another person ran into the room and jumped on the mad woman from behind. Sam! He put one arm round the woman's neck and with his other hand he held her wrist, fighting for the knife. The woman fought hard, screaming wildly. But Sam was too strong for her. Lila watched them as they fought. And then something unbelievable happened. As Sam pulled the old woman to the floor, the long gray hair slowly fell to one side of her head. Lila suddenly realized that the face wasn't the face of a woman. It was Norman Bates, and he was screaming like a woman. Lila pressed herself against the wall. She felt sick, and Norman Bates's mother, a dead woman with no eyes, watched with a wide smile on her brown face. She seemed to be laughing at her son as he lay screaming on the cold stone floor. Chapter 15. Look at that fly on my hand. Sometime later, Sam and Lila sat with Judge Chambers in his office. The room was full of people, all of whom were listening to a man who was talking to them about Norman. "I got all the story," Dr. Steiner said. "But not from Norman. I heard it from his mother." "I don't understand," said the sheriff. "I know it's difficult, but I'll try to explain," Dr. Steiner replied. "You see, there is no Norman Bates, not now. There never was one Norman Bates. He was half Norman, half his mother. Now he's all his mother. He'll probably never be Norman again." "Did he kill my sister?" Lila wanted to know. The doctor looked at her sadly. "Yes, I'm sorry. He killed Arbogast, too. If we look in that swamp near the motel, I think we'll find both of them. We'll probably find other dead people, too. Pretty young women, just like your sister." The doctor looked at all the serious faces in the room and began to explain. "We have to remember that 10 years ago, Norman killed his mother and her lover. He lived alone with his mother, and she was the boss. Then she met another man, and Norman was jealous. He thought that his mother loved this other man more than she loved him, so he killed both of them. A short time later, he went out one night, dug his dead mother out of the ground, brought her back to the house, and hid her in the cellar. He looked after her like one of his stuffed birds. But keeping his mother's dead body was not enough. Norman soon began to think like his mother, to talk like his mother, to be his mother. She became half of him. Sometimes he was Norman, sometimes he was his mother, and sometimes he was both at the same time. He had to talk to himself. He was never all Norman, but he was sometimes all mother. When he liked a girl, the mother side of his head became angry. His mother was jealous of him because he was jealous of her when she had a lover. Dr. Steiner turned to Layla. "When he met your sister, he thought she was beautiful. He wanted her. That was a problem for the mother side of him. There was a fight inside his head between the two of them, but his mother won because she was stronger. So he suddenly became his mother, and his mother killed Marion. When Marion was dead, Norman woke up after a kind of deep sleep and really believed that his mother was the killer. He put your sister's body in the swamp because he loved his mother and wanted to save her from the police. When danger came too near, Norman put on his mother's clothes. He walked round the house, sat in her chair by the window, and talked in her voice. He tried to be his mother, and now he is. The fight inside Norman's head is finished. The stronger person has won. He is now his mother." "And what about the money?" said Judge Chambers. "Who got that?" "The swamp," Dr. Steiner replied. Somewhere in the same building, 2 policemen were standing guard outside a door. Behind the door, there was a small white room with no furniture or windows. Norman Bates was alone in that room. He was sitting very still, with a strange smile on his face. Perhaps this person was Norman Bates. He had Norman's face, Norman's body, Norman's clothes. But it was really his mother who was alive. Norman was really dead now. It's sad when a mother has to tell the police about her son. The voice inside Norman's head was saying, "They'll put him in prison now. He in prison. A bad boy who looked through holes in the wall and killed people. He thinks that I did all those bad things. He tried to tell that to the police, but they know it wasn't me. I've never done anything bad. I was like one of his stuffed birds. I could only watch. I couldn't stop him. I couldn't move. Look at me. I can't even move a finger. And I'm not going to try. I'm going to sit here very still. I'm not going to move. I'll never move again. They're probably watching me now. They'll see the sort of person that I really am. I'm a kind person, the sort of person who can never hurt anyone. Look at that fly on my hand, for example. I'm not going to kill it. I can't. I hope they're watching. Then they'll see and they'll know. And they'll say, "Look at her. She's a good woman. She can't even kill a fly."